Systematic Shinobi by Jordinio 0. 6. Chapter 6. The next morning, Daiki, as usual, found himself in Training Ground 69. After finishing through his initial workout and healing himself up with the mystical palm jutsu, getting them gains instantly, he got around to the next part of his training, ninjutsu. Usually, for the last little while, he'd been working on his lightning chakra generation and manipulation, but he'd put that on hold yesterday for a little bit, because he finally had the excuse he needed to work on a jutsu that would for sure make his training, at least in the learning sense of things, go much faster. Taking a deep breath and focusing, Daiki crossed his fingers in a familiar hand seal. It was a bit odd. It wasn't one of the normal 12-hand seals. At best, it could pass for a modified ox seal, but it did help him focus on the physical aspect of his chakra more, which on of itself was interesting and made a lot of sense. Shadow clone jutsu, he declared. He felt chunk of his chakra be expended as he focused on the technique. But not half. There was a puff of smoke, and an identical copy of himself appeared at his side. Yet there were glaring discrepancies. For example, his clone was pale and sweaty, looking ill. You got the ratio wrong again, the clone said haggardly. I know. Daiki sighed and cancelled the technique. The clone disappeared in a chunk of smoke, and he felt the chakra used to create it return to him, or rather, about 3/4 of it. He was beginning to see why this technique was a lesser form of a kinjutsu, a forbidden technique. Getting the ratio down was actually quite tough. On top of that, doing it wrong meant much of the chakra used would go to waste, leaving the clone formed wrong and ensure the user got less chakra back upon the clone being dispelled. With that failure, he'd lost roughly 1/13 of his total chakra capacity, which might not seem like a lot, but it was when it only gave him so little chances to get the technique down before he had to rest and recover his chakra again. Still, that was a better attempt than the last few, before he'd given up last night and returned home to rest. And he was learning a lot through trial and error. For instance, he initially thought that clones would have the same chakra capacity as him, lower chakra to begin with, but more or less like a half-empty tank. Basically, like one could put their hand in and feel space that wasn't filled with water or whatever. Maybe a bucket would have been a better analogy. Either way, that was not the case. The clone was a complete copy of him, right down to the chakra. The thing was, though, the clone's tank, while a perfect copy for the most part, was a fraction of the size, meaning a shadow clone of him would never have the same max chakra output that he did, especially since his chakra coils would refill while the clones were still active. Hell, the clones could apparently regenerate chakra as well, just like him. Shadow clone jutsu was so fucking busted without even getting into the memory transfer aspect of things. Bringing his hands together again, Daiki was about to attempt the jutsu once more before he frowned and paused. He could feel someone coming. He might not be a sensor ninja, but his general senses weren't bad either. He looked over his shoulder just as a familiar high-collared, dark-haired Uchiha made his way into the training ground. Sasuke eyed the training ground idly for a moment before making his way over to Daiki. Your training ground is a chore to get to, he grunted. Exactly why I picked it. I don't have a family compound to train in, so people don't disturb me, Daiki retorted, turning around to face the boy. Sasuke pursed his lips before nodded. Sound logic, he replied. I imagine 2 idiots not bothering you constantly also helps with training. Wish I could say the same. You're not wrong, Daiki agreed. Honestly, as big a help a Jonin sensei would be to my training, having to have those 2 former teammates of mine along as well would make my progress slower than it is now, I'm sure. I'm better off, really. Hell, not getting a Jonin sensei leading to his current situation was probably the best thing that ever happened to him. It's easy to see with how much stronger you've gotten, Sasuke nodded. Wish I could say the same. Well, Naruto's not dead weight, at least. Unlike Ami and Suzuki were, they were pathetic, Daiki pointed out. Sasuke snorted. I notice you didn't mention Sakura not being dead weight. He responded. That was because he couldn't. Sakura had talent for sure, but she didn't apply it. And without Tsunade personally training her, she really had no right being on a team with Sasuke and Naruto. They were absolute monsters in the making, without even taking into account Ashura and Indra. Well, she's good eye candy at least, he settled on replying with, hiding a wince, and she'd drop to her knees for you at a word. I'm almost jealous. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at him before scoffing, and have her think we're fated to be together forever or some other girlish fantasy nonsense. There was pure derision in his voice. No thank you. She already gets in the way of me getting stronger enough. I don't need her getting any other crazy ideas. You want to fuck Sakura? Feel free. Hell, I'll wish you luck. Maybe then she'll stop bothering me about this dating tripe. Well, wow. He knew Sasuke wasn't a fan of Sakura early on, but he didn't think he'd full-on express his more or less blessing for another dude to fuck her just to keep her away from him. You know, you never expressed interest in any other girls at the academy, Daiki hummed. You realize you're going to need to bang some girls to revive your clan, right? Women, not girls. Sasuke surprised him by correcting him promptly. Weak, useless deadweight, I have no interest in them being the mother of my children and the future matriarch of my clan. Besides, that goal is secondary and something that can be taken away at any moment unless I accomplish my main goal. Killing your brother. Daiki nodded in understanding. Yes, Sasuke hissed, his onyx eyes flashing red briefly. You're a lot smarter than my teammates. Beyond Kakashi, those other two have no idea what I'm after. Daiki shrugged. Naruto can't understand it. He'd try, but he won't be able to understand it. Because he hasn't experienced anything like that, he reasoned. And Sakura has deluded herself into believing she's in love with you when she knows jack all about you. A brief chuckle left Sasuke. Funny, you sound like you do, though, he pointed out. A bit, he nodded in response. I'm an orphan. But I did know my parents for a little while, or at least my mother. My father was killed by the Kyuubi during its attack, and my mother was eaten away by its corrosive chakra for a few years before dying. I suppose you can understand a bit then, Sasuke agreed, though you at least have the solace of knowing the one who murdered your family is dead and gone now. Daiki chuckled. You'd think so, huh? He hummed, but said nothing else on the matter. It was funny, before he basically became a fusion of two people, he originally despised the Kyuubi, hating it for making him live life of an orphan. But perspective really was key, and he found he couldn't hate Kurama. Not only was he mind-controlled into the attack, he'd been sealed away. For nearly an entire century, used and abused by humans, he couldn't blame the fox for attacking humans on sight and trying to kill them when the Sharingan hypnosis was broken. They lapsed into a silence that hung in the air. It was only broken by Sasuke giving a cough and reaching into his pocket, withdrawing a small scroll. Here, by the way, as we agreed on. The boy handed it over to him. I've written down all the instructions you'll need to learn the fireball jutsu. Oh right, thanks. Daiki blinked, accepting it before looking Sasuke in the eye. You're a lot more civil than you were yesterday. Sasuke smirked. You proved you were worth my time. He responded simply, You're strong. Daiki grinned proudly, and getting stronger and stronger every damn day. He agreed. Next time, I'll win, Sasuke vowed. We'll see. Daiki actually found he was quite eager for another spar with him. By the way, on the matter of Sakura, while I wouldn't mind a tumble with her, she's way too high maintenance for my liking. You can keep her. How generous of you, the dark-haired Uchiha replied, voice dry and rolling his eyes. Well, maybe pigs will learn to fly, and I'll be able to foist her off on Naruto, along with that Yamanaka annoyance. Unlikely. But I can dream. Snorting, the Uchiha heir gave him a nod, bidding him goodbye, and walked away, leaving Daiki behind. He watched his fellow Genin leave, eyes fixated on his back. Huh, did I just become friends with that guy? He wondered. Yes, Daiki's voice echoed throughout Training Ground 69 the very next day. It had taken a few days, quite a bit longer than Naruto to get it down, but he'd done it, with only a fraction of the chakra the blonde Jinchuriki had at his disposal. How'd you feel? He asked the perfect clone of himself standing at his side. About the same, his clone shrugged. Beyond the chakra, which is obvious, I don't feel any different. Daiki nodded. What about the system? He asked next. That's there too. His clone confirmed. though the chakra capacity is reduced on mine. Interestingly, he couldn't see the system the clone could see. He'd tried showing the system off to a random civilian, and they couldn't see it either. In that way, it meant the system was somehow linked to his individual mind then. All right, 2 left, Daiki pushed on. He'd dwell more on those thoughts later. Can you access the sealed equipment? When one created a clone, any equipment they had on them was generally cloned as well. Since the seal was tattooed directly into his skin, it made him wonder if… There was a puff of smoke that emanated from his clone's hand, and within it, grasped in his palm, was the white hilt of a familiar Kumo Make ninjato. The weapon of that missing nin he killed nearly a month ago. What was his name again? Kagero or something? It was kind of surreal how easily he could forget the name of a man he murdered, decapitated, and then handed over his head for cash. Well, guess that answers that then. Daiki blinked. That would be incredibly useful in the future. Only one left then, his clone agreed, before erupting into smoke as he dispelled himself. As soon as the clone was gone, a rush of memories swept through Daiki's head, all from the perspective of his clone. He could see in his mind's eyes the status screen from another perspective, the halved chakra capacity, the feel of the ninjato in his palm. It was actually a bit disorienting. I shouldn't abuse this too much right now and recycle the clones every hour or so at most, he mused. He had to remember he didn't have an innate Jinchuriki/Uzumaki combo healing factor or anything even close to that. Yet. I can work with that, he grinned, bringing his fingers into the cross-shaped hand seal once again and shouting, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Time to get down to the grind, right and proper, time to crinkle those leaves. Daiki sighed, the sizzling of cooking meat sounding in his ears as he leaned back against the comfortable seating behind him. It was soft and comfortable. A balm for his aching muscles. For the most part, after training, he could heal his muscles right up to tip, top shape, more or less, gaining instant muscle increases. His muscles still felt the fatigue, though, and through constant punishment, phantom rips in the muscles themselves. He had to admit the seating inside the booths of Yakiniku Q felt absolutely heavenly compared to his piece of shit couch. I should look into getting enough cash to move to a better place, or at least get better furniture, he mused to himself. That would involve going on more missions to raise the money, though. And, well, he was kind of, super busy training himself into the dirt, so he didn't become a statistic when Orochimaru decided he wanted to invade, because he was still baby-raging over the fact Minato got picked over him to be Hokage. Oh well, it was kind of working for him, if his status screen was anything to go by. Name, Daiki Yurei, age, 13. Chakra capacity, 18,900 over 18,900. Tune in. Strength, 69 over 500. Endurance, 102 over 500. Durability, 69 over 500. Agility, 69 over 500. Taijutsu, 145 over 500. Ninjutsu, 165 over 500. Genjutsu, 10 over 500. Bukijutsu, 40 over 500. Chakra control, 180 over 500. Chakra affinities, lightning. Adept, you have stepped onto the path of roaring thunder. Fuinjutsu, adept, you are no longer a mere amateur. He was looking damn fine now. Everything seemed to just balloon upwards now that he had clones he could spar with, especially his Bukijutsu and Taijutsu. Since he could use multiple styles to fight, and so could his clones, they could mitch and batch, get experience fighting in all different ways. Funny, though, that his ninjutsu had blown right past his taijutsu after he'd managed to finally crinkle the shit out of that damn leaf. Honestly, after that, getting the fireball jutsu down had been easy street. In total, he'd worked on his lightning chakra for a month, 2 or more, even technically, when including clones into his training, which made his chakra capacity grow massively in the process as well. He mentally thanked Kakashi for this training method. God, it was helpful. Actually, could I send a clone off to do D ranks for me every single day, he wondered. That shouldn't be too much of a problem, and he could accumulate missions for his record and earn money every day while he was at it. As it was, he'd learned pretty much everything he had access to right now beyond the Rasengan, but he wasn't sure he wanted to touch that for the time being. Maybe it would be best to give a little time on it to make it seem more natural. If he just barraged Hiruzen and such with the news of all this shit he was coming across or recreating, it would look too good to be true. And definitely seem suspicious, even though no spy would ever be so blatant as to wave that shit in front of people's faces. It would just lead to awkward questions he didn't want to answer though. Though he definitely needed to work on that genjutsu score somehow. Maybe go see Iruka-sensei. He knew he had learned a few genjutsu. The man had used them to test his class now and then, after all, and one of the tests to obtain his headband had been breaking out of Iruka's hell-viewing technique. The grind never ends. Daiki chuckled under his breath, putting it out of mind as he grabbed the tongs that had been provided to him and flipped over the meat atop the barbecue within his booth. While he waited, he flared chakra through his palm, and in a buff of smoke, a map appeared in front of him. He repeated the motion, and a pencil appeared as well. God, his Dimension Force seal was so fucking convenient, no having to reach for scrolls or anything like that, just a thought and he was holding what he wanted. Truly, the best jutsu ever. What is with that place, honestly? He rolled his eyes as he focused on a specific part of the map. He'd been taking the time to triangulate where Isobu, the three-tailed bijou, should be right now. And he was pretty sure he knew where it was. The huge lake Isobu was in was between Fire Country and Tea Country for sure, since Kabuto took a boat to reach the area. Which wouldn't make sense for anywhere else, especially because Tea Country was to the south of Fire Country and lead out into the open ocean according to the map. The problem was there were no large water surfaces between Fire Country and Tea Country. But if one took a boat across the Hanguri Gulf, part of the ocean that swept into a junction in between Wind Country, Fire Country, and Tea Country, they would find themselves in the land of rivers, a small country named as such because of the massive lake or river that used to be connected to the ocean before a fight Hashirama Senju was a part of rearranged the map and created a landmass that cut it off, a place that was less than 20 miles away from where he met Shiramari and not even a day's journey from the Katabami gold mine, where Raiga Kurosaki was. River country sure is rife with treasure. Daiki snorted to himself, but yes, he was sure that was where Isobu was. Now he only needed to get stronger, copy and learn how Naruto's seal worked, or at least half of it, and somehow convince the three-tailed bijou to willingly join up with him and let him become its Jinchuriki. Then somehow explain that off, without it sounding like complete bullshit to everyone around him. Maybe he could spin a tale involving Raiga and Ranmaru, take care of 3 daimyo with 1 shuriken and all that. Before he could think any further on it, a loud voice broke him from his thoughts. Meat is youth. Daiki blinked slowly. Indeed, one must partake in plenty of meat and facilitate their protein intake. A younger male voice agreed. Meat is indeed youthful. Can't you guys be quiet for one day? A soft female voice groused in annoyance. The patron already told us, there's no booths left. Let's just go somewhere else. You're disturbing the other customers. Nonsense, Tenten, the first voice harumphed. I'm sure some will be amenable to sharing space with us. And as the voice finished, a head full of shiny black bowl-cut-shaped hair peeked over the barrier hiding the booth Daiki was in, and a blinding grin shone towards him. Why, hello there, my young youthful friend. Maito Gai greeted him boisterously. I see that you are alone in this booth. Might it perhaps be okay for I and my youthful students to join you and partake in youthful tasty meal together? Huh. Daiki blinked slowly before shrugging. Sure, I don't see why not. I've got plenty of space. He gestured to the other side of the booth, enough for 4 people to sit comfortably, with nary a soul. He wasn't going to say no to the chance to get to know them. How youthful! Guy flashed him a thumbs up before turning and saying something to his team and gesturing to them to follow him. A moment later, he bore witness to a robust, muscular and tall, bow-haired man in a green leotard, followed by his mini-me, and a long-haired, white-eyed, pretty boy sitting opposite him, while the seating at his side shifted as the last member of their name sat next to him. Sorry about them. Tenten apologized with a sheepish smile, cheeks flushed and rubbing the nape of her neck in embarrassment. Don't worry about it. He waved her apology off. I had plenty of space, as you can see. Looking at her, he had to admit, Tenten was quite the looker. A pretty, creamy-skinned face, warm chocolate-brown eyes, a cute, delicate-looking nose, a graceful neck, and a quick glance from the corner of his eyes, seeing the way the front of her sleeveless pink shirt stretched out at the front, told him that she was far more curvaceous than Sakura. He was actually surprised. He thought Tenten was more the slender type, but she was actually kind of stacked. A pleasure to meet you, friend. Guy's mini-me thrust out a thumbs up at him, drawing him from saying anything else to the pretty bun-haired girl at his side. I am Konoha's beautiful green beast, Rock Lee. He flashed a massive grin at him, and for a moment Daiki was sure he heard an audible ping come from them. Daiki! He introduced himself rather blankly. Seeing it on a screen was one thing, but it in no way prepared him for the sheer exuberance of the older boy. That's the way Lee socializing his youth, Guy cheered, before flashing a thumbs up at Daiki, just like his student, and I am Konoha's sublime green beast, Maito Guy. Daiki blinked at him, before looking at the long-haired Neji, who seemed to be doing his very best to ignore his teammate's very existence. Are you also some kind of beast of Konoha? The look Neji gave him in return, one would think he'd insulted his dead parents, ancestry and everything else he took pride in. No, I am not, he replied simply before grunting out his name and looking away to stare out of the window, and probably imagine the other occupants of the booth out of existence. A groan of dismay came from Tenten. This is why no other teams want to hang out with us anymore, she whined. She shook her head and forced a brittle smile on her face. I'm Tenten. She introduced herself. You have it rough, huh? Daiki pointed out, kinda glad I don't have teammates now. Well, there was no now about it. He'd been thanking his lucky stars since he talked to Sasuke about it. You have no idea. Tenten groaned. He resisted the urge to pat her on the back sympathetically. A part of the Genin core, I assume then youthful Daiki. Guy hummed, making him look over to the man. How is it treating you? You look like a strong lad. I can't imagine you not doing well. Pretty well. There's a lot more freedom in it I've figured out recently than having a Jonin sensei. He shrugged. I don't really have anyone to teach me, but hard work and guts are carrying me along pretty well regardless. Silence. The whole booth went silent for a good 5 seconds, and Daiki felt himself get a bit uncomfortable as Guy and Lee just kind of stared at him. And then they exploded. Oh my goodness. Guy wept, great big tears. Daiki-kun, you are so youthful. Lee joined him, and then they began hugging each other and crying together. He turned to Tenten. Correction, you have it really rough. Tenten whimpered. Thankfully, after that, Guy and Lee seemed to quiet down, and while Guy ordered food for his team, discussion naturally shifted to the big shiny red kunkadink, or rather coincidence they all had in common, being ninja. Lee asked what sort of shinobi he was, and at first Daiki wasn't really sure how to answer, before settling on claiming to be a general shinobi, with leanings towards ninjutsu and taijutsu. He got especially hyped about the taijutsu and invited Daiki to come meet him at Training Ground 9 any time, and they could spar. Guy jumped in and happily agreed to even give Daiki some tips if he did. It was definitely something to keep in mind. Tenten asked him what kind of jutsu he knew, and he rattled of a few, mentioning the mystical palm, though, had her giving him an odd look, before changing the subject to ask about missions. Really, they had a lot of interesting missions to talk about, even completing a B-rank mission together at one point apparently. The most he had to share, really, was his last mission. It did seem to get a bit of attention from Neji, though, when he revealed he'd killed and claimed the bounty of a Kumo ninja, even got a slight nod of respect out of the frigid Hyuga prodigy. Time seemed to fly in, and before he knew it, he had eaten his food, ordered more, and finished that up. And Team 9 were right there with him. He actually didn't even need to pay. Guy happily footed the bill for being kind enough to let them join him in his booth, before rushing off with Lee, both running on their hands through the streets of Konoha. Neji said nothing as he left, leaving him alone with Tenten. Please don't tell me you're actually going to wear that. Tenten grimaced beside him, pointing at the gift Guy had left him with the profound tip of, stay youthful. a green leotard that he held in his hand. What, don't think I could pull it off? He grinned at her. I don't even Tsunade-sama could pull that off. Tenten gagged. Oh, he begged to differ, especially with how skin-tight it was. Think so? Daiki raised an eyebrow at her. I think you could pull it pretty well, actually. After all, now that they were out of the booth, he could get a good look at her, good and proper-like, and he had to admit he was not wrong. Tenten was pretty tall for a girl, with long-tongued legs, and green baggy pants she wore were stretched out deliciously at the back. Tenten had it going on for sure. Her cheeks flushed a little bit. Stop. She giggled a bit, punching him lightly on the arm. Seemed she wasn't all that used to boys flirting with her. Kind of expected, with how much time she spent training and being a tomboy. But still, good to know. All right, he held up his hands in surrender. So what's up? Daiki asked, getting to the root of the issue. There had to have been a reason she hung around instead of leaving with her teammates, right? She winced. I don't really like asking this, but I've hit a brick wall, the pretty older girl began. Can you help me with the mystical palm jutsu? Oh, that was all? Sure, Daiki agreed. Not only would it get him in good with not only a fellow Konoha ninja, and a pretty older female one at that, but Guy was nice enough to offer him some tips and to come to him for advice if he needed it even. So he saw no reason why he shouldn't help his student out in turn. Plus, beyond all that, he kind of liked Tenten. He'd come to see she had quite the sarcastic personality and dry personality to her. That was easy. Tenten froze, surprised. Should it have been, though? We hit it off with pretty well, right? He pointed out, anyway, you can generally find me in Training Ground 69 when I'm not busy with missions or the like. Oh, okay. Tenten began responding before freezing and giving him a deadpan look. Why do I feel like you chose that specific number of Training Ground just for the number alone? His lips twitched into a switch. Because you've got brains to go with that beauty. He winked. Her face flushed a deep red, and he laughed, bidding her goodbye and continuing on. He had more training to do after all. The grind never ended. Are you sure this is a good idea? Kakashi looked up from his book to meet the Sandaime Hokage's eyes. I mean, Sasuke is fine, but Sakura has no filter when she's around him, and Naruto's still far too rash. They aren't really a team that's suited for escorting a high-class VIP. It's a B rank in name only, Hiruzen puffed on his pipe. It's only that high, even because of who you're escorting. The chance of combat is drastically low, and it's less than a day's travel from here. And it will look good for yours team's mission record when the chance comes to be promoted. It's rather silly so, is it not? Kakashi directed his phase to the mission scroll sitting on the Hokage's deck, displaying the picture of the client. Who ever heard of the leader of a hidden village having to pay another village to escort them? Waterfall sadly has precious few shinobi these days, and young Shibuki lacks the disposition needed. The Hokage shook his head. Quite a waste, really. The boy is incredibly talented. Perhaps he could even have been a match for you given a few years, if not for being afraid of his shadow. Perhaps, Kakashi shrugged lightly. Though I have a feeling there's a specific shinobi, or rather kunoichi, you want me to check in on while I'm there. He eyed the older man knowingly. Well, I wouldn't pick your team for this mission otherwise. The Genin act as a good smokescreen for you to sneak in. Hiruzen chortled lightly. He was just making sure young ninja got some props for their part in it. He reached into his robe and pulled out a scroll, unrolling it across his desk. Her name is Fu, no last name, an orphan from what we have been able to uncover. She is 16 years old, general strength below that of your typical Chunin. Waterfall has few capable of teaching her. After all, she is the current container of the Nanabi, the seven-tailed horn beetle. Depicted on the scroll was a young teenage girl. She had tan skin, with short mint green hair and striking bright orange eyes. And you just want me to check on her? Kakashi asked. That's all. Just get me a general personality profile and check how she's treated by her village. Hiruzen confirmed with a nod. Waterfall is not known for their sealing prowess. We have to know if she is liable to lose control and unleash the beast. While not as powerful as the Kyuubi, not even close, it is still the third most powerful of the tailed beasts. And with the ability to fly freely through the air, It is a terrible foe to deal with and could devastate the countryside before we can stop it. Kakashi grimaced. Yes, he could understand exactly how big a threat that would be. All right, I'll get it done, the copy ninja promised. Splendid, Hiruzen grinned, before pausing for a moment. Actually, a young Genin has caught my eye lately. Part of the Genin Corps, he's training very hard to make up for that. Would you be fine taking him along? A B rank, on his record, will go a long way to allowing him to compete in the Chunin exams. From the Genin Corps, huh? Kakashi hummed with interest. 7. Chapter 7. The next morning, Daiki made his way to his ever-homey training ground a bit earlier than usual. The sun even had only shone the barest hints of beginning to rise, and that was only because it was summer. Not that it would be like that much longer. They were already at the tail end of summer, mind you. Still, there was a whistle on his lips and spring in his step as he jauntily swaggered his way through the paths between the training grounds towards his destination. He was in a good mood, for sure. And why wouldn't he be? His abilities were looking sweet as shit. He had an Uchiha who plopped his ass in his training ground every now and then to challenge him to spars, and even now would have a cute older girl coming to him for assistance and letting him endear himself to her. And on top of all that, he had a rough plan of action for the future. Really, everything was coming up, Daiki. This was the age of the great Daiki. Abruptly, the great Daiki paused just outside of Training Ground 7 and stared. A somewhat short girl, just around 5 feet tall, stood hiding behind a tree. Short, midnight blue hair and porcelain skin, dressed in a large baggy white jacket and a pair of dark blue shinobi pants. Hinata Hyuga was peering around a tree, stealthily, bending out just a bit to look into the training ground. Well, at the very least, he could see for himself that, like the tree she was hiding behind, with her bent over like that, he could see Hinata had quite the trunk of her own. Why the hell doesn't she just use her Byakugan? He couldn't help but wonder. This was precious time in which she could be training. She could at least be training her dujutsu and expending chakra constantly to increase her capacity if she was going to waste time spying on Naruto. Truly a plebeian to the great grind set. Honestly, watching her waste her time like that made his skin crawl a bit. She was a damn kunoichi for crying out loud. How long had she even been there? He couldn't believe how wasteful that was. Why come to the training grounds this early just to spy on a crush, yet never even approach them? If she was at least using her Byakugan to do it, he could let it slide, because at least some gains would be getting made. Hinata was almost as much of a disappointment in the ninja arts as Sakura and Ino, only wasn't, because she had superior training than them from her clan. But considering Hinata was the oldest of his graduating class, well, the disappointment only grew. Come to think of it, besides Daiki himself, Naruto was the youngest of their graduating class. Did that make Hinata an Ara type? Probably not. She had the body for it, and the background, but she lacked the mindset. Silly Hinata, if she worked up the nerve and Ara'd Naruto, he would have been eating out of the palm of her hand. Speaking of Naruto, Daiki was curious as to what kind of grind the boy was up to. He made his way over to Hinata, light on his feet, and she didn't even notice him coming. Truly, she wasted her dujutsu. He stopped behind her and peeked over her head into the training ground. Yep, there was Naruto. He had divested his usual orange jacket, leaving him in just his orange pants, sandals and mesh shirt, and was currently in the process of push-ups, his face caked in sweat and a small puddle having formed beneath him. And off to the side, he could see all 3 of the training posts, typical of one of the Konoha training grounds. Daiki nodded in approval. It was suboptimal of a grind, but he was grinding away for sure. And he supposed with his innate healing factor, being an Uzumaki and Jinchuriki, he was gaining mightily, regardless of how poorly his grind was. So, stalking Naruto again, Hinata? Daiki pulled his head back around the tree and asked from behind her. Hinata gave a small, startled eep and whirled around, face flushing a bright red. Daiki-san, she stuttered. I am indeed Daiki, he agreed with a nod. Why not go just talk to him instead of wasting time like this? He got straight to the point of the issue. Hinata just stared at him for a moment before swallowing heavily. I can't. You're never gonna get him if you act like this. He couldn't help but roll his eyes. Naruto ended up with plenty of girls after him, even what amounted to the leader of an entire country wanting him to impregnate her. Nice going, Naruto. He couldn't help but mentally praise the future Naruto. The current Naruto was thoughtless and ignorant, but he'd grow into himself well for sure. What do you mean? Hinata asked shyly, poking her fingers together. You know what I mean. Let's not jump around the issue. He rolled his eyes. And as you are right now, you aren't right for him either. What she wanted wasn't a role she could fulfill. She didn't have the strength or mental fortitude to be a partner for Naruto and support him. Fucking hell, she couldn't approach him for a conversation. A hurt expression flashed on her face. I see. Hinata looked down. His chest stung at the expression and how defeated she looked. And he realized what situation he was in right now. He just kind of approached a lone girl who was watching over the target of her affections and started lambasting her. Now he just felt bad, since she really was just a genuinely nice girl. Thankfully, he could fix that. Hinata yelped as he wrapped an arm around her waist and heaved her up into the air and over his shoulder. Despite that dump truck she had on her, she was light as a feather, and with her pressed up against him like this, he could get a feel for her chest. She was just as stacked as Tenten, maybe a bit more, actually. She would come across as even more voluptuous, he supposed, since she was that much shorter than Tenten. What are you doing, Daiki-san? Hinata spluttered. Turning on his heel, Daiki resumed his trek towards the ever-welcoming training ground, 69. I felt bad with how sad you looked, he shrugged. So I'll help you out. You want to be closer to Naruto, right? I can make that happen. You can? Any hesitancy in her left, and she gaped at him, white eyes wide, but he heard the hopefulness in her voice. She swallowed quickly and shook her head. You don't need to do that. He ignored what she said. What time do you usually meet your team? He asked instead. 9, Hinata replied. Plenty enough time, it was only just after 5 in the morning right now. Good enough, he nodded. Also, don't worry about feeling indebted or something, or like I'm going out of my way. I'll be getting something out of this as well. You will. Hinata blinked. Damn right he would. There were 2 things he needed to do with her to help her achieve femme fatale ara status. 1, get her confident in her body and rid her of the shyness, something he already had an idea for. Secondly, was making Hinata get good. In the process, he would be able to spar against the gentle fist of the Hyuga clan, which would give him experience in the future with it, should he end up fighting Neji in the Chunin exams. And again, the more experience he got fighting, with the more variety of opponents, the more his skill stats tended to rise. So he'd get gains, and he would get free eye candy out of it. A win for him, really. 2 of her fingers lashed out, aiming for his shoulder, but were easily avoided. He stepped into her guard, and Hinata's eyes widened as his knee flashed up. She tried to jump back, but he was too fast for her to retreat from, and could only bring one of her arms up to block it feebly. Her arm bone rattled from the force, and Hinata grimaced as she was sent flying back through the air. She slammed into the ground hard on her back, and lay there for a moment, panting deeply and staring up at the sun that had properly risen now. He was so strong. Daiki-san is absolutely ruthless, she thought idly. Was he different back in the academy? She remembered he kept to himself mostly, but he fought tooth and nail during spars, though she couldn't remember him having this same edge to him. It wasn't really a bother. Her father was rougher on her when he forced her to spar with him anyway. What am I even doing here? Hinata wondered. It had all happened so fast. Daiki had found her watching over Naruto-kun. He'd caught on to her feelings, easily, as if they were as plain as day, hammered in that she wasn't good enough for Naruto-kun, a fact she already well knew, and then just dragged her off to train with him. That was 3 hours ago. For a full 2.5 hours, Daiki had ran through physical conditioning, and she'd noticed he was wearing weights of some kind. He'd made her join in as well, but not before making her take off her jacket, leaving her in just her mesh shirt, and forcing her to keep her Byakugan activated constantly. She'd only managed a fraction of the amount of exercises Daiki did, and that was without weights. And then once he was done, he'd forced her to spar with him, and he'd thrown her around like a rag doll. She felt less like a training partner and more like a punching bag, really. He reminded her of Sasuke Uchiha with how intense he was during sparring, and a lot of Naruto-kun with how he threw himself into his training. She couldn't measure up to him at all. She was a failure after all. Still, she just had to keep trying and not give up. She'd get there eventually, even with how untalented she was, right? A shadow was cast over her suddenly, and Daiki's face stared down at her from above. He stared down into her eyes before his gaze trailed down to her chest. On reflex, Hinata's arms came up to cover her chest, with how much she'd grown recently. Her obscene breasts bulged out the front of her mesh armor quite plainly. And, with the way they stretched it out, if one looked closely, they would be able to see quite a lot of her chest through the mesh. Is this really necessary? Hinata couldn't help but ask, face flushing in embarrassment. She'd asked why he made her take off her jacket before and leaving her in just her mesh armor, but he'd just told her to do it and not question him, that it was needed. So far, all she knew was that she'd been jumping around a lot with the fat on her chest, bouncing around noticeably. If only she were slender like Sakura-san, a proper cute girl, she wouldn't have this issue. The few times she'd seen Sakura-san in mesh armor alone, her chest didn't bulge the mesh out obscenely like her own chest did. Course it is, Daiki shrugged with a grin. You're way too shy, it's kind of annoying actually. You need to be more comfortable in your body, so the best way is to show it off a bit. And sparring at the same time makes sure you're growing stronger while you do. Respect the grind, Hinata. He lifted his hand and waggled his finger at her, as if giving her a stern lecture. Well, it kind of made sense, she supposed. She admitted, if only to herself, she'd forgot her state of dress when the sparring began and had to put all her thoughts into making sure Daiki didn't smash her into paste. Though she still didn't understand fully what he meant by the grind. She assumed it had something to do with training, especially because he kept paraphrasing the words gains, which obviously was some form of slang for gaining more strength. Looks like you're done now, though, he mused, and sat down beside her. Well, 3 hours of conditioning and sparring isn't bad. I doubt Sakura or Ino could last even a third as long as you. So good on you, I suppose. Yet despite the fact that he was sweating quite noticeably, Daiki looked like he was still raring to go, and that was while wearing those weights of his. Still, a small rush of pride ran through her at his light praise. It may have been petty of her, but she felt good at being praised, at being better at something than Sakura-san, the girl who held all of Naruto-kun's attention. Too bad, his plan would never work. He was missing one crucial thing that seemed to fly over his head in regards to her. I understand what you're trying to do. Hinata pushed herself up into a sitting position beside him, but it won't work. Pretty sure it will, he refuted confidently, without hesitation. How she wished she could have that same confidence he seemed to have. She envied that. She giggled lightly. It won't. She still had to insist. Thank you for trying. It does mean a lot, but you can't be confident in something that has no worth. My body isn't as attractive as Sakura-san's, so there's no way I can compete with her for Naruto-kun's affection. She had made her peace with that back in the academy. She knew she would never get Naruto-kun to herself, but she still couldn't resist watching over him training, never giving up and trying to emulate that. He inspired her to keep going. Still, it meant a lot that Daiki was trying to help her regardless, even though he blatantly pointed out himself how impossible it was for her to achieve what she wanted. She looked him in the eye and mustered the best smile she could to thank him, only to see him looking at her blankly. What? He blinked, looking utterly confused. Is something wrong? Hinata asked, confused herself now. Yeah, what are you talking? He looked at her as if she was stupid. The shy thing's a turn-off for sure. As is the baggy clothes you always wear, and you have hair not far from Sasuke's. You'd look way better with longer hair, but beyond that, you're hot as shit. Hinata's mind was suddenly quite empty as utter confusion swept all of her thoughts away, and she stared at the muscular, tan-skinned boy sitting beside her. Don't get me wrong, Sakura's pretty, love that hair of hers, and she has a nice ass. But she's a skinny waif, no guy wants a chick like that. Daiki bluntly continued on, before gesturing to her. Maybe when she stops dieting like she likes to do all the time, that'll change for the better. But as things are right now, your body is way, way better than Sakura's. Better ass, nice hips, exotic eyes, and a pair of tits that just don't quick. Hinata's mouth opened and closed, and she felt her face heat up to burning proportions at his crass words. I thought you were just shy in general and about how fast you're developing compared to the likes of her, but sheesh, to think your body is bad. Daiki shook his head. Man, no idea where you got that idea from. You mean you weren't just trying to make me accept and get over the fact I'm unattractive? Hinata absently asked. Hell no, Daiki snorted, before suddenly his eyes widened. Wait, don't tell me you actually thought this because Naruto likes Sakura and based attractiveness on that. Why did it seem so silly when he said it like that? She couldn't trust her voice, so just nodded. Daiki laughed. Naruto isn't in love with Sakura. Hell, he doesn't understand the concept. Trust me on that. He's been alone for so long, nobody's taught him the difference. He pushed on. He's literally trying to be friends with her, but doesn't know how to do it. No idea why he's fixated on her like that, but yeah, at best he has a small crush on her. He's not in love with her or anything like that. Daiki, it seemed he knew a lot about Naruto-kun. She hadn't known any of that at all, despite all the time she'd watched him. I don't really know much about Naruto-kun, Hinata realized. She didn't know what hobbies he had outside of training, what he liked to beyond that, even and more. It was sobering. She had to try harder, but putting that thought aside right now, didn't Daiki's words mean she was more attractive than Sakura? I'm good-looking, she asked hesitantly for confirmation. 6 out of 10, better than Sakura, who I'd rate 3 out of 10 though. Daiki wasn't at all embarrassed to share his thoughts on her attractiveness. Grow your hair out, and don't try and cover up that rocking boat of yours and get rid of some of that shyness, and you could easily hit a 9 out of 10, maybe even full-on 10 out of 10, depending on how you go from there. Her cheeks felt like they would burst into flames at any moment, and she had to resist the urge to go grab her jacket and put it on when his eyes once again drifted to her chest. The fronts of her breasts were hidden by her arms, but he could still see the upper swells of her breasts and down into her cleavage. But all the same, she felt one side of her lips twitch up at his words, and something stir in her chest. It made her arms shake, yet was a good feeling that almost urged her to drop her arms and let him see fully. Nobody had ever so blatantly complimented her before and expressed such a surefire belief in any of her potential. Longer hair, more stylish clothes, less shy. She chanted lightly to herself. That was all she needed to completely dwarf Sakura in attractiveness. A thought suddenly occurred as Daiki tore his eyes away from her chest and grinned in a way that made him suddenly seem very handsome. What did you mean you would get benefits yourself out of helping me? Isn't that obvious? He snorted, raising an eyebrow at her. For one, I get experience fighting against the gentle fist. It's good training. And secondly, I got to ogle you at the same time. 2 benefits at the same time. Gotta respect the grind. Like I've been telling you, Hinata, get the most for your efforts. Despite how absurd this situation was, Hinata couldn't help but giggle again. I see. Thank you, Daiki. You've taught me a lot. She smiled at him. Despite the crudeness of it all, she was very thankful for his upfront honesty with her. And what he said and the way he acted, it put a lot into perspective for her and made the world seem just a little bit more open to her. Like I told you, you don't need to thank me, he repeated himself from earlier. Pretty sure I'm the one who got the most out of this. His eyes dipped to her chest once more for a brief moment, a blatant, obvious look, before he looked back up and winked at her. She could have stayed here and listened to him praise her for hours. It was like she was someone who had been lost in the desert for so long, had suddenly found a beautifully full oasis of crystal-clear water to drink from. She could not, though. It was almost time for her to meet her team. Is it okay if I join you again for training sometimes? Hinata asked before she left, as she stood up and retrieved her jacket. Fine with me. I'm generally here a lot of the time when I've not got something to do or have missions. Daiki shrugged. Feel free to hit me up anytime you want. Hinata gave him a wide smile before bowing to him politely in thanks. It was only as she did and saw him grinning his eyes looking below her face that she realized her large breasts were dangling quite noticeably from it. She may have stayed in that position for a few dozen more seconds than necessary before standing up and pulling her jacket on, bidding the younger boy goodbye and walking away. Hinata almost tripped as a wolf whistle echoed from behind her, followed by Daiki's voice cheering, "I hate to see you go, but I sure do love to watch you leave." His words confused her for a moment until she looked over her shoulder to see him eyeing her retreating backside. She couldn't wipe the massive smile from her face as she made her way to meet her team, and there was a bit of spring in her step all the way. As soon as Hinata was out of sight, Daiki stood up and stretched his arms out. Well, that was interesting. He hummed to himself. There was a puff of smoke at his side, and all of a sudden Kakashi Hatake was by his side, making him jump, startled. "The heck are you doing?" Daiki calmed his racing heart and growled in annoyance. He really needed to find a way to up his sensory abilities. "You're about as smooth as sandpaper, huh?" Kakashi replied with instead, snorting, "Don't you think you played it up a bit too much for the girl? This pervert was watching us." Daiki resisted the urge to cringe. Maybe, he forced himself to shrug, but hammering it in like that will help her in the long run, will make sure it's reinforced. Plus, it wasn't often one could be so blatant about checking out a good-looking girl. Still, to think she thought she was unattractive. He shook his head at the sheer absurdity of it. Hayashi had really killed any pride in that girl, huh? Well, hopefully that helped her out, and she wasn't bad company on top of being nice to look at and useful for getting those gains in taijutsu. Still, time to address the elephant in the room. "So why are you here?" he asked Kakashi, confused. "I've not made any more bets with Sasuke, but I won't say no to 2 more jutsu." Since he'd met Sasuke and gotten the fireball jutsu from him, the Uchiha had turned up to his training ground twice to spar, and he'd won both. He'd even more or less caught up to Sasuke in physical speed as well. Still, each spar was close as hell, and the force palm jutsu was what kept him ahead of Sasuke. I'll think about it," Kakashi shrugged, which probably meant no, but whatever. "As for why I came to speak to you and heard your adorable little flirting and confidence-boosting conversation with the cute little Hyuga heiress, my team has a mission. The Hokage asked me to let you tag along." "What?" Daiki asked, confused. "Why?" Kakashi shrugged again. "Apparently you caught the Hokage's eyes, and he feels like it's a waste for you not to get a shot at the Chunin exams," the man explained boredly. "This mission is a B rank. In name only, mind you, just a simple VIP escort mission. It will only take a day and will look good on your record." Oh, that made sense. He had stood out a little to the Hokage with his last mission and seemed to have shown a decent bit of potential with him getting the chameleon contract. He should get around to summoning soon, now that he thought about it. He'd been waiting until his chakra capacity was quite a bit larger to get fully into it. He should have enough now to summon lower-level chameleons without too much issue. "All right, when?" he asked. "We'll be meeting at the North Gates in 2 hours from now," Kakashi replied. "Best get ready quickly." Daiki nodded in understanding. That gave him a decent while to rest and recover the chakra he'd used up this morning during training. "I'll meet you guys there then," he replied and made to leave. "Before you leave, there's something I want to ask you, or at least point out." Kakashi's voice stopped him. "You seem to know a lot about Naruto, despite rarely interacting with him." Daiki paused. How annoying, he wouldn't have said what he had to Hinata if he knew Kakashi was watching. Thankfully this he'd long since prepared an excuse for. "I'm not an idiot, you know," Daiki responded, looking over his shoulder and smirking at Kakashi. "I'll lay it out simply for you to connect the dots. My parents were killed by the Kyuubi. Naruto was born on October 10th, the very same night. There's an absurd hatred directed at him by the older generation of this village, and to sum it up, as you've probably noticed, I'm pretty decent at Fuinjutsu." He tossed a wave over his shoulder at Kakashi, flashing his tattooed palm at the man before continuing on. "I see," Kakashi mused, nodding. There was no need for some long-drawn-out excuse. Keeping it vague was the best way to go about it. Hinting at knowing about Naruto's Jinchuriki status and his dead parents were good enough reason for him to have kept an eye on Naruto and learned about him. Unlike your standard scrub Genin, Daiki did not need to bother with a backpack to carry his equipment and supplies for the mission. Though maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea, he mused as he approached the north gates of the village. Not a backpack with supplies, but rather perhaps some kind of weighted back, or torso weights. He could really up the grind even further with that. He put it out of mind as he reached the gate, finding Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke already waiting. Sasuke greeted him with a nod, while Sakura waved at him. "Hey Daiki, going out on a mission?" the pink-haired girl asked. "Yep," he nodded. "With you guys, actually. Apparently I'm supposed to tag along." "Eh?" Naruto sounded off loudly. "But why? We don't need your help. We're the best." "Do you have to complain about everything?" Sakura groaned. "After the way Wave went, I'm totally fine with the extra help, right, Sasuke-kun?" She immediately looked towards the boy for his approval. Sasuke shrugged. "I don't really care either way," he replied, before smirking at Daiki, crossing his arms coolly and leaning against the gate frame. "Just don't slow me down." "Right back at you," Daiki snorted. "The record is 3-0 in my favor, remember?" "That was a long time ago." Sasuke shrugged. "It was a week ago," Daiki pointed out dryly. "Semantics," the Uchiha rolled his eyes. "I've grown much stronger since then, learned a new powerful jutsu and a few techniques. Things won't end the same way next time we spar." "Oh, look at you cute little Genin getting along like barking dogs," Kakashi's voice cut in before he could respond. "It brings a tear to this old man's eye." "You're late," Naruto growled at him. Kakashi ignored him and gestured to his side, where a tall, willowy man with long brown hair stood dressed in blue, a headband depicting the symbol of the hidden waterfall village tied around his forehead. "So this is our client," he explained. "His name is Shibuki. He's the leader of the waterfall village. Our job is to escort him back home, more or less. Don't you feel important?" The man, Shibuki, introduced himself, while Naruto and Sakura together griped at Kakashi for making them wait so long. From what he idly made out, they were actually supposed to meet an hour ago. Still, all that was mostly drowned out as Daiki stared at the waterfall Shinobi. "Don't tell me," he thought. He remembered this guy from a mini-side movie. Something told Daiki this wasn't going to be as simple a mission as Kakashi claimed it would be. Not long later, they were on the road, moving at a slow pace along the path heading out of Konoha and through the huge trees along the way. "Why are we walking, though?" Daiki had to wonder. No, seriously, why? He could understand if Shibuki was a civilian, but he wasn't. He was a shinobi. "So Shibuki," Sakura struck up conversation not long after leaving the village. "Since you're the leader of your village, doesn't that make you the Takikage?" Shibuki blinked. "I suppose so." "Wow, and you're so young," she praised him, making the man laugh sheepishly. "Honestly, calling him a Kage is insulting to Kage." Daiki resisted the urge to snort. Instead, he slowed down a bit and dipped to the back of the group, so he didn't need to talk to anyone, guarding the rear with Sasuke. If things were going to go pear-shaped on this mission, then he wanted to be as prepared as possible. And there was one technique he could work on that shouldn't be too hard. Naruto got it down instantly, more or less, after all. With a small flare of chakra, a small puff of smoke erupted from his right palm, and suddenly he was holding a white-hilted tanto. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at him, but said nothing. Hours later, Daiki had to wonder, is Naruto really a damn prodigy after all? Because he'd expended a decent little chunk of chakra, and all he'd managed to do so far was coat the sword in his chakra. It was a lot harder to convert the flowing chakra into the lightning element. He'd briefly got it to spark for a bit, startling the others with him, but he hadn't been able to hold it. He was missing a spark of knowledge, the trick to keeping it going. He knew he was on the cusp of it, though. It was like having a word on the tip of your tongue, but just not remembering it. Typical, why couldn't things ever be easy for him? Deciding to chuck it in for now and recover his chakra, Daiki sealed the tanto back in his palm. "No matter, I just have to grind more." He nodded to himself. The grind would never betray him in the end. "Giving up?" Kakashi asked, eyeing him with amusement. "Just taking a break to think." The Genin rolled his eyes. "You already know what I'm missing anyway. Why not just tell me?" The asshole had been peeking over his shoulder at him, struggling along with the chakra flow technique, before giggling and going back to his smut. Ah, but then I'd be depriving you of a wonderful learning experience. Kakashi smiled. Prick. I hate you, Daiki deadpanned, and thus my day is complete. Kakashi snorted, turning back to his book. Hate him so much. A pat on his shoulder distracted him, and he looked to see Sasuke, giving him an understanding nod. You see why I'm beginning to envy you? He asked dryly. Yes. Yes, he fucking did. Daiki nodded. Somehow, just the fact that there was a guy who knew all the answers he needed, that was right there and able to help him easily, yet for his own amusement, not doing so, somehow made the gains even slower. He was clearly a heretic to the grind. It wasn't long later that they arrived more or less at their destination. It would have went much quicker, even with walking, if Shibuki wasn't jumping at every shadow and hiding behind Sakura, multiple times after birds made loud squawking noises above. Kakashi had went into an explanation when Sakura asked about Shibuki's father, the old leader of Taki, a man who fought off the current Tsuchikage to protect his village and losing his life later in the process after the fight. Shibuki wasn't even worth calling him a shadow of the man. Daiki shook his head and instead focused on the absolutely massive waterfall cascading down the side of a huge mountain. It was quite a view, he had to admit. Maybe even worth putting up with Shibuki. Shibuki-sama, two kids rushed over just as they stopped at the base of the waterfall carrying rubbish bags. Hey, don't come close, Shibuki rebuked them when they stopped in front of him. I'm the village leader, you know. Daiki resisted the urge to snort. Instead, he sat down on a nearby tree trunk. We're out here cleaning up the river, you know. The small, cute girl of the two, wearing her brown hair in tow pigtails and with her bangs combed over one eye, responded. He vaguely remembered her as well. Well, whatever, Daiki tuned them out. He continued ignoring them even as Shibuki roped them in to help them clean litter out of the river as an extra D-rank mission, and Kakashi agreed, much to Naruto's vocal annoyance. He was quick to give in, though, when the kids thanked him, ever eager to please others who were nice to him or stroked his ego. Kakashi sat on a rock to the side of him with Shibuki. You know, you should help them as well. He beckoned at the three of Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura at the river surface, picking up trash and loading it into bags. I would, but it would deprive them of a wonderful and fulfilling experience of community service, Daiki responded dryly. Besides, I only signed up for this mission, and you aren't my sensei, so you can't make me do it like them. Ah, frustrated at your inability to succeed. I see. Kakashi nodded sagely before turning to Shibuki. So what do you make of the recent rumors of suspicious activity going around in this general area lately? He asked, ending his conversation with Daiki. Fuck Ranmaru's eyes. Maybe plucking that eye out of Kakashi's head and killing him would be worth going missing Nin. A small grunt at his other side made him look to the girl, Shizuku, to see her struggling to drag the trash bag off to be disposed of. Here, I'll get it, Daiki offered, standing and grasping the opening of the bag and easily hefting it up. Ah, thanks, Oni-chan. She smiled at him brightly. You're so strong, she praised. I am, from a lot of hard work. He agreed and promptly flashed a middle finger over his shoulder at Kakashi when the man snorted. So can you show me where to get rid of this Shizuku-chan? Sure, follow me. Skipping forward happily, Shizuku gestured for him to follow her. He was led through the forest to what looked like a dumping ground. Shizuku helpfully informed him that everything piled up there was destroyed completely at the end of each month, though she didn't actually know how, so couldn't tell him the exact details. Why don't they just seal it all away? He had to wonder. Storage scrolls were piss easy to make. He'd learned how to do so in roughly 2 weeks or so. And they couldn't tell him they had no sealing expertise in their village. They had Fu, didn't they? The Seven Tails Jinchuriki, someone in there had to have sealed the Nanabi into her. Man, if only he could examine Fu's seal. It was bound to be much weaker than the 8 trigram seal, yet at the same time much easier to learn. He put that out of mind and walked Shizuku back to the riverfront, though he was a bit surprised about a certain someone being gone. Where's Kakashi? he asked Sasuke, who was his way with a bag held over his shoulder, as Shizuku shipped back over to help the others continue cleaning up the trash in the river. Who knows, he shrugged. He got a messenger hawk, then rushed off somewhere. Told us to head back to Konoha once we're finished cleaning up this trash. Giving him a nod, Sasuke trekked down the path Daiki just came from, muttering under his breath about Kakashi all the way. Kakashi just left. Left the last Uchiha and the Kyuubi Jinchuriki alone outside another village. Bullshit. Daiki narrowed his eyes, making his way back over to sit down on the tree stump he'd claimed. Something was clearly going on behind the scenes, clandestine and something that was to be kept off the books. Kakashi must have another mission in the area and is using us as a smokescreen, he mused. He also couldn't be sure the Hokage actually signed him off for this mission. Kakashi clearly saw how strong he was and perhaps fibbed a bit to get Daiki to accompany him so he could work as backup for Sasuke, Naruto and Sakura. And there was no point in even bringing up those suspicions with the Hokage either, because if the mission was as important as it was for Kakashi to ditch Naruto and Sasuke for a bit outside the village, then the Hokage would totally cover for him. Well, whatever. He just had to be ready for when whatever enemies in the area attacked. Besides, this would be another good test for how much he'd progressed. At least there was entertainment in the meantime, like Naruto annoying Shizuku by making fun of Shibuki, and her pushing him straight into a piece of dog shit. It was the little things that mattered in life. In the meantime, he ran his hands over his wrists and ankles, sealing away his weights for now.